Thank you and good afternoon. I think the challenge has been very appropriately framed by the introducer, because the first session after lunch is the most challenging. So I always prefer to speak in the session immediately preceding lunch, because everybody is at their most alert, and we are supposed to speak, or at least I'm supposed to speak in what was termed in the invitation as an overview speaker. I don't know if the others are going to present some underview, or, but anyway, so I asked the organizers what exactly they expected me to do, and they said, no, you're free to frame your thoughts around this theme. So I think it's a time-tested principle that when you're given some freedom, you must misuse it. So I may be forgiven for trying to broaden the scope of the discussion here, but in no way should the panel speakers feel pressured or influenced by what I'm going to say. And I thought that it will be useful to place this discussion, and I'm looking forward to the very eminent panelists to speak here, on what exactly is the context in which we are discussing this theme of market linkage for sustainable agriculture. And I, of course, my former boss is sitting here with, another decade ahead of me in terms of experience. But I'm sensing for the last couple of years, since this whole sustainable theme has started emerging in the policy discourse around agriculture, that just as we had a stereotype about conventional agriculture, or people call it intensive agriculture, or green revolution agriculture, very early in this journey, a certain stereotype is developing around the concept of sustainable agriculture. So what do I mean by that? I find increasingly that the term sustainable agriculture is being used within a very narrow, shall I say, field of technology or package of practices, as if all that we need to fix is some of the bad habits that farmers were, by policy, forced to adopt or choose to adopt, or were, shall we say, inveigled to adopt by market forces, certainly in the last decade. And we need to wean these well-meaning farmers off these so-called ecologically destructive practices, and then everything is going to be fine. So please suffer me for the next 15 minutes when I say that unless we look at this whole idea of sustainable agriculture in a broader context, we are not going to be able to solve for the specific problems that we are trying to address. In the case of this session, we're talking about market linkage. So if I were to try and define the contours of sustainable agriculture, I would see three essential pillars. Of course, all agriculture has to be economically sustainable. Without viability, there is no agriculture. So economic stability or economic viability or sustainability is the first pillar on which this house has to rest. The second pillar is, of course, of environmental sustainability. Yes, we do understand that without addressing the natural resource base in a sustainable manner, there is no future for agriculture. But there's a third dimension, and I especially wish to highlight this because it's most relevant, of course, for India as a country, but also for the larger universe which is dominated by smallholder agriculture, and that is the social sustainability. So the economic sustainability, the environmental sustainability, and the social sustainability. Without looking at this picture in a composite way with all these three pillars, I don't think that we can address one isolated theme like marketing or technology or institutions or whatever. if you see how we came through this journey since 1950, when this country produced only 50 million metric tons of food, to last year when we had a harvest of more than 330 million metric tons of food. This was made possible because all three pillars were consistently addressed by both policy and the market. You put up some of the best agricultural research systems at the apex level. You put up an extension system to take that research to the farmer. You put up credit and input supply institutions. You put up a system of sending price signals, the CSEP. You set up a procurement system, and you set up a distribution system. Nankumar Saab, my old boss, he comes from Kerala, where a certain type of rice is preferred. But they are not able to produce enough rice for themselves. It's always been an importing region. Punjabi farmers who do not eat rice, and they certainly do not like parboiled rice, grow the surpluses of parboiled rice, which are then procured and distributed through the PDS, so that Kerala and the southern states, which as a region is deficit in rice, has no problem of availability of rice. So you thought through the concept of sustainable food security and sustainable agriculture in a more holistic manner. So what are we doing now? And I'll, without making too much of a preface about it, I'd say that today, effectively, our entire agricultural system is in a state of breakdown. The so-called food security that we won for ourselves, which at least ensured macro-level food availability, even though there are pockets of chronic malnutrition, undernutrition, even hunger on some occasions in some patches. But as a country, we have solved the problem of growing enough food, fiber, and feed for ourselves. Don't forget that along with the 1.4 billion humans, this country has about 1 billion animals. 1 billion. All the cows and the buffaloes and the horses and the donkeys and the goats. So they also need to eat. And we have achieved self-sufficiency in food, fiber, and feed because a country of India's size cannot depend on the international market to supply the humongous quantities of these three categories of agri-produce. Today, if I was to describe just 4 features of this breakdown, I'd sum them up as follows. You have a huge income and investment crisis. Every survey, every data is giving you that evidence. Farmers are simply not earning enough from agriculture. Even those households that are claiming to be farm households are earning only 1/3 of their income from agriculture, the rest coming from wage labor, small business, migration, and whatnot. So that's your first crisis. The second crisis is linked to our environmental pillar. There is a huge natural resource crisis. The quality of soil, the availability of water, the contamination, the loss of carbon content. I think this audience perhaps knows about that. So you have, on the one hand, a huge income and investment crisis. You have a huge natural resource crisis. You have a third crisis, which is a technology crisis. Every one of your major technologies is either plateauing or it's showing reduced yields. That also links to what's happening to the natural resource base, but that's your third crisis. More worryingly, there's a technology divide that is emerging again, which we actually managed to bridge about almost 25 years ago. We could take the green revolution technology into the remotest parts of this country. But today, there is a huge gap in the productivity of the better endowed regions and the less well-endowed regions. And the fourth, which according to me is the most dangerous crisis, that is the human resource crisis. every young person in the village wants to get out of agriculture. They are willing to come to the most horrendous working conditions as couriers, delivery boys, guards outside your and my houses. So these four, I in one talk called them the four horsemen of the apocalypse. That's a biblical story if some of you are interested, where the appearance of four signs was supposed to signify the apocalypse. Some of the world's best, most productive arable lands in the country lie or start just about 5 kilometers from here. If you cross the Nizamuddin Bridge and you go to the east bank of the Yamuna, from that point up to the time you come to the Ganga Ghats, that is some of the world's most fabulously productive land. Mughal princes killed each other for that, for control of that land. The British burned so much treasure and human lives to control it. And what are we doing to it? We are building highways on it. We're building townships over it. We're building airports over that. It's a great myth today. This figure keeps going around that India has maybe 10 crore farm households or 12 crore farm households. So what's our problem? We have 120 million farm households. The truth is we probably have barely half that number of active farm households. Simply because somebody has managed to get various family members entered into the revenue records doesn't make it a whole, shall we say, thriving ecosystem of agriculture. So for me, this very hard-won food security, and one of the things that Mr. Nandkumar and I sometimes talk, see, our generation of civil servants, I joined in the early 80s, Mr. Nandkumar joined in the early 70s. And we were the ones, I grew up in this city, and I remember being handed over a ration card and some money by my mother as soon as I got back from school, saying, finish your lunch and go get into the queue. My father was a middle-level government servant in Delhi, but you had to make sure that you got your monthly quota of wheat and sugar. Incidentally, sugar was also rationed, right? And what a way we have traveled. But I'm afraid, certainly I'm much ahead of everyone in the checkout queue here, but if not the younger people in this room, certainly your children are going to see a country of food shortages again. Because the way we are looking at agriculture and agriculturists, I think more than the problem of agriculture policy is the policy towards farmers. And unless society learns how to value both farmers and farming, I think we are in deep trouble. So I'm told I have 5, right? So I'll try and sum up by simply putting 3 principles on the table. And as I said, I'm sure some of the very interesting people to follow me will have better things to say about this. So we've talked about what is happening and why it's happening. So how can it change? So in my view, I think 3 things have to be accepted by larger society. I would place government a little further down the queue because I think we have a societal problem towards farming. If you read the discourse in the press, and the press should not be blamed for creating these views, the press faithfully reports the larger dialogue of society. Today there is a view that farmers and farming is overindulged. It's over-subsidized. We should be firm with these guys. What do they mean turning up outside Delhi and saying, we don't want this policy, or we want a legal guarantee of price? They are pampered. And as I say, we are saying this because we are either unaware of that ecosystem which delivered us to this point where we are so sanguine about our food, or we simply perhaps are following some trend we've seen on Twitter or Instagram or whatever. I'm sorry, I'm not a social media person, but I believe that there are some very powerful forces. Somebody called it a new religion, that today the Ayatollahs, the new religion, are in Silicon Valley because their algorithms are what's driving people's opinions. So I'd say first and foremost, society has to accept that we'll have to actually pay a little more for our food. So the terms of trade for agriculture, which have been negative for the last 15 years, these are not my thoughts. These are, experts who have calculated these things, and these are published statistics. The terms of trade towards agriculture have to reverse and become positive again. It has to become positive as an enterprise. Whether there are 5 crore farmers or 6 crore or 10 crores, these are basically that many number of enterprises. Just like you count MSMEs, you track them, you find out how much they are borrowing, what they are producing, how much they are selling. We'll have to do the same for agriculture. The data on agriculture is among the poorest among all the sectors of our economy. We are far ahead, maybe close to global norms if you're talking about industry or services. But as I said, we can't even say authoritatively how many farmers exist in this country today. So the first is we need to change the terms with which we are dealing with agriculture. That's my first point. The second point is, it's linked to the first one, price incentives have to be depoliticized. So I love this definition of price by a former Nobel laureate in economics, Eugene Farmer, an American. And he said, the ideal price is which reflects all factors. Just think about it for a minute. I give you a price, it reflects your production conditions, your marketing conditions, your social conditions, and both of us agree this is a fair price. So I won't go into details here, but I'm saying that we need a completely depoliticized, and well, of course, there's nothing which can be depoliticized, but we need perhaps a different way of giving price incentives to agriculture. And third, my favorite, and where I have invested most of my life's work, that is institutions. So we have had a wonderful phase when we believed that institutions were necessary, whether you want to take technology to farmers, whether you want to take better prices, whether you want to deliver inputs or credit, whatever. But unfortunately, in the last 2.5 decades, I'd say, certainly post 1991, we have stopped investing in these rural institutions. There are people here who know more about this than I do, but I'd say the third thing is we need to reinvest in this new generation of institutions which can address the challenges going ahead. I'm going to stop here because I thought that I should not provide any answers, but provoke some of you into thinking. If I've achieved that, I think I'll be successful, and I very much look forward to the panel's contribution. Thank you so much for your patience in listening to me. Thank you.